Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here today with a book tag. This is a tag called Nonfiction on Booktube, and it was done by Olive at a Book Olive. She has really been the champion of Nonfiction November, and this has been an outgrowth of that. The goal of this tag is to expose more people who read nonfiction in the BookTube community so others can find you. So the funny thing about this is when I first saw it come out, I thought, oh, that's fantastic. And I didn't think it was for me. I did not, until very, very recently, think of myself as a nonfiction reader, which doesn't really make sense if you've been following my channel any, or if you saw my list of so many ideas of the nonfiction books that I'm kind of trying to get through this month. These are all books that I owned previous to Nonfiction November that are just here waiting for me to jump into. So I started to question myself. I started to have a little bit of an identity crisis because I've always thought of myself as fiction first, women authors, women writers, works in translation, literary fiction, mysteries. Those were kind of the order that I put literary work in, and I guess I just hadn't really thought about nonfiction. So let's get into it, and I'll go through all of the prompts. So first one, how much nonfiction do you read? I actually read a lot. I think every single month, every week, I'm reading at least one nonfiction book. And I tend to read, I would say about 2 or 3 a month at a minimum. I think that's usually kind of how that goes. 2, what kind of nonfiction videos do you make or do you want to make? So I tend to talk about nonfiction in my week of reading, which is kind of my Friday reads. I also talk about nonfiction when I buy new or used, and so in my catch and release videos. I've done 3 book review videos. So I've only been on BookTube since April. But in that time, I've done 3 kind of deep reviews. One was for The Milkman by Anna Burns. The second was Heavy by Kiese Lehman, Heavy, an American memoir. And then the third that I did was a discussion of 3 women and other books on desire that I thought handled that topic in a better way. So just right there, 3 book reviews, only one of them were fiction, and the other 2 were nonfiction. I don't know what I was thinking. So I will continue to do those. I'll continue to put that material together kind of as I read and as I find something that I want to talk about. It also dawned on me that I do a lot of business book related reading. So leadership theory, new approaches to organizations, design thinking, those types of books I'm really interested in. Dynamics, interpersonal dynamics at work. So I'm going to do a specific video probably before the end of the month on business books that are really interesting and applicable to just life in general, not only within the business context. So I think I'd like to do more of that. And I'd also, I think thematically, I think in groupings. And so I can see doing maybe some recommendation videos of certain things in combination. That might be fun to do. So stay on the lookout for that. Number 3, what's your favorite subgenre of nonfiction? I would say first and foremost, I love a good memoir by an artist, be it a writer, a painter, a musician, a sculptor. I'm really drawn to creative types, creative process, and so I love that. I also love people who are adjacent to the arts. So, for example, like Peggy Guggenheim, or someone like that who is who does things in support of the artist or the artist's work. So really, really interested in that. I just saw Celia's vlog, which was an absolute delight. She's reading My Life with Marianne, or a book about Marianne, who was Leonard Cohen's muse. And so stuff like that, love it. Absolutely love it. I'm also a huge fan of reading essays, specifically political essays and or feminist essays, like this book. This is Audrey Rich, Culture, Politics, and the Art of Poetry, Essential Essays. I like the history of feminism. I like books about history. I like books about history that help me get the context for the books I'm going to be reading. So, for example, I read a few books for, as I mentioned, Booktober, where it just helped me understand what it was like back then, what life was like back then, what was topical, what was so culturally, what was happening. I also enjoy travel logs. Yeah, so apparently I have a lot of favorite nonfiction. Who knew? Who knew? Next up is, do you have a favorite nonfiction book? Again, this is going to make you laugh, or at least it made me laugh. The book that I rave on about, I bang on about this book so often. This is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Humph. This is my favorite book of all time. I read it on the 1st of January every single year. I will do a vlog of me reading it the 1st of January. This is the first book I want to read every year to ensure that I have a beautiful year ahead of reading books, because this is such a book lover's book. It's an epistolary novel, an epistolary book between a woman in New York City and a bookshop in London. And this is after World War II. And it's just this beautiful relationship between these characters. And it's delightful, it's funny, it's sad, it's poignant, it's so illuminating. You learn so much about what was available and wasn't available during those times. And it just gives you a great reminder of what to value and how to value life. So this is my favorite book. It's a nonfiction book. What was I thinking? Yeah, I'm a nonfiction reader. Next up, what do you think keeps people from wanting to read more nonfiction? So when I think about this, I think it's about being told to read something. And so to me, when I start to chafe against it, it's because I'm thinking about school. I'm thinking about being forced to read books that I wasn't interested in, that I didn't feel connected with, but you kind of have to suffer through it. And so I think when I think of it, I think of like textbook style. And yeah, if you tell me to read a nonfiction book and I'm not drawn to it, I'm not going to enjoy it. But I think that's true with any book. I also think that it does require a different type of reading. You can't just immerse yourself and lose yourself unless it's a really rich kind of narrative that the person's able to develop, like an Eric Larson book. He's known for his narrative nonfiction. So I think those two things, those few things specifically, will keep people away. And just the intimidating time commitment, feeling forced, feeling like it's work instead of a joy. Number 6, why do you like nonfiction? I think what appeals to me about nonfiction is the ability for me to hone my curiosity, to follow my serendipitous mind and allow myself to have a question and want to know the answer and want to follow that through to some kind of conclusion. That tends to be what I love about nonfiction, and is that ability to kind of prop up and give me more context and more support for the ideas that I'm starting to percolate, and yeah, I just feel like it helps me be more well-rounded. It helps me understand what I'm taking in a much better way. So that's what I like about nonfiction, for sure. Number 7 is, what is a nonfiction book that you read because of BookTube? So I haven't been on BookTube very long, only since about mid-April, but I'm going to change this a little bit. This is a book I'm going to read because of BookTube, and that is Underland by Robert McFarlane. I've heard nothing but amazing things about this. I adored the Overstory, and I hear that this is a nonfiction version of what happens underneath the ground instead of above the ground with trees. And I hear a lot of comparisons with that in terms of evocation of beauty and insight. So really excited to get to that. 8. What is the best nonfiction book you've read lately? So I'm not going to talk about the books that I just talked about in my week of reading wrap up, but I am going to talk about something that I think is a universal recommendation that anyone can take and read and get something from. And that is Good Talk, a memoir and conversation by Mira Jacob. Now, this is a graphic novel-ish. It's told in panels, and it's a story of a woman having conversations with her young son as he grows. He is biracial, so she has married a man of a different race, and the child is trying to come to terms with his identity and where his place in the world is as the world is changing and becoming more threatening to his future, quite frankly. It's really powerful. It's very evocative. It's very concisely written. And the way she approaches it and the frames are just remarkable. I highly recommend it. It's won awards. It's well-deserved. Number 9, what are some of your nonfiction reading goals? So I am going to continue to read nonfiction as I've always done it. I just may be a little bit louder and prouder about it, I guess, moving forward. I will continue to read based on my whimsy and based on my curiosity. I think that serves me best and makes me enjoy it more. So yeah, that'll be those are my goals. And then 10, what is your advice for incorporating more nonfiction into your reading diet? I think some other people have made mention of this as well, is that if you can be open to a podcast, you can be open to nonfiction audiobooks. You just need to reframe it as long form podcasts. So we're used to podcasts. I think a lot of us do podcasts. And if you find that the length is intimidating, just only go in for chunks and plot it out that way. Nonfiction is one of those things that you can span out a little bit longer because it's a different reading mechanism. It takes something different in your mind to read it. So if you are okay with that, I think that's a wonderful approach. I think audiobooks are fantastic. If the price is prohibitive, I would say look, if you are in the Western world and you have a public library system, look into your public library system to see if there are ways that you can download audiobooks. I know in the United States we have Hoopla is a service, an app service that you can use on your phone that will allow you to download audio files and for audiobooks. There's also 2 other apps that I use constantly. It's Libby and Overdrive. So those are 2 fantastic ones I would recommend as well that connect with a public library system. And then if you don't have access to that, there are services like Scribd, which I use because they have a lot of foreign published work that I have access to that I can't get otherwise. But they also have audio book options. And so those would be fantastic ways to do it. And then there's always Audible, but sometimes that's cost prohibitive. And very often, I mean, let's be real, how often are you going to re-listen to an audiobook? So for me, I don't necessarily want to own it. I just want to borrow it and listen to it. So that's it. There was a bonus question about suggesting some other booktubers that you think do a great job with nonfiction. And I will just say there's so many that have already been mentioned because I'm kind of coming to this late. I would recommend just following the tag and discovering a lot of people for yourself. Because while there are some big names, there's also many people who I think are coming to the realization, maybe like myself, that they are actually nonfiction readers through this process. So again, thank you so much, Olive, for prompting me to think about my reading in a whole new way. This has been a delightful discovery. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.